of the reasons why you would have a lot of really connection between the military and the seminary is that, for a division officer in the military or a lower level officer, you're using a lot of the same skills, really, and it's a lot of the same kind of personality of someone who's going to go and be a military officer, the same kind of person who'd want to go and become a priest. I remember when I was an officer myself, a lot of the things I did and really enjoyed were the same skills that a pastor would use. Some guy comes to you and said, "Oh, I'm at this point in my career. How do I get from this point to this point?" Or I'm trying to figure out, should I stay in the Navy? Should I get out of the Navy? Or really any number of other similar kinds of things. And it's really, if you're good at one, you're going to be good at the other. So I think there's a pretty clear, in my mind, at least from my experience, a correlation between the two jobs.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, definitely, because as officers, so when I was going through all my training, you work on you spend a lot of time with people, and in that same way, you're going to spend a lot of time with people as a pastor. So you're going to be kind of guiding them and helping them along, like Robert said. But the thing that stuck out to me most with the correlation between military and priesthood was when I got to seminary and we started going over, ethics and especially talking a lot about virtue, which is a very Catholic principle that follows from Aristotle all the way down through Aquinas till today. Those are the same things that I learned when I was training with the Army. We have the 7 Army virtues. They're not always followed perfectly, both in the military and in the seminary or priesthood, but these are all things that we strive for, and they're kind of foundations that we build our character on. So as I was developing these virtues in the military and really fostering that life of virtue, it's not foreign for someone to kind of come to this realization of a call, because they do have their human formation down. They have respect, loyalty, love, devotion. All of these things that the military stresses will be the same sorts of things that you'll find in seminary as well. So it's kind of a good building block in which to build, the pastoral life or the spiritual life on. You have to be a man of virtue in order to really grow. So the military does a good job of fostering that. And when it's followed, you can see the result is really virtuous human beings, really good people. So I think you'll find the same thing in seminary and in priesthood.
Growing up, I always wanted to be a military officer. It was like some kids want to grow up and be, Michael Jordan or Derek Jeter or somebody, but I wanted to grow up and be, the next, Chester Nimitz or Dwight Eisenhower or any of those guys. So then I went into ROTC at college at Georgetown University, and enjoyed the program and enjoyed the school a lot. But what I really found more of a connection with was, the religious side of things and that spiritual life, and like we just talked about, how you can really bring that element into life as a military officer. So I got commissioned in the Navy, and then went and did 3 years active duty, and then came into religious formation, religious life, and now at the end of the time here at Mundelein, after about 3.5 years, I'll go back off into active duty with the Navy to be a chaplain. That was, and as I was in the program and as I served as an officer, I always really felt that was the way for me to make my real substantive contribution to the country and to the church. The military chaplain combines a lot of my main interests.
One of the biggest things that impacted me, both in my career and in my vocation, was the household that I grew up in. So my father was a Navy guy, actually flew F-14s, and growing up he really fostered a love for the military. Never explicitly said, "Hey, you have to enter," but we did kind of grow up in a very strict household that, I have 10 brothers and sisters, so 11 of us, and you kind of have to be very rigid in running a household like that. So that was the type of formation that I received growing up. Really fostered a love for soldiers and sailors. And in the same way, love for the church and love for the priesthood was also fostered. So we oftentimes had priest friends over and went to Mass as a family and tried to get to daily Mass as often as possible. So those things that were foundational in my life growing up kind of began to manifest themselves later on as I got older, in a similar way. That my love for the military started coming out and led me into ROTC. And then from ROTC, as I was training to be an officer, my love for the church and for the priesthood eventually grew into this desire to enter seminary. So I'll do the same thing after I'm ordained in 3 years. I'll go back active duty and serve as an Army chaplain.
For me, I mean, it wasn't so much a priest as it was honestly a Protestant minister that I met when I was down I served in Jacksonville, Florida. So when I was down there, small base, there wasn't that many, by military standards, there wasn't that many people there. There was an aircraft carrier, the John F. Kennedy, and there was a Catholic priest assigned to that, but I mean, he had 5,000 people there, so he was quite busy. He didn't have time for really to get out to the rest of the ship. So people who were on the other ships would go to the base chapel. And then was a Catholic priest there for about 2 weeks when I got there, and then he left to go back to wherever he was from. And then there was this Protestant minister there that he's just like, hey, do you want to talk? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I want to talk. And, just kind of talked about life and about being in religious life and his life as a chaplain and, what he did, his work. And I just remember every time I go talk to this guy, he was always so generous with me. He was much more generous with me than I deserved. And, I was very grateful to him every time I would go talk to him for his willingness to give me his time and willingness to meet with me. And he certainly didn't have to do that. And I heard, a number of people throughout the base who would have met with him, and they said the same things. It's like, how great is it to have somebody like this here that we can go and talk to, get away from the ship, get away from the job, and just go and talk to somebody. And this guy's not going to go tell anybody about that. And for me, that was seeing that guy and seeing how, not only how happy he was in his work and his job, but like how much good he was very obviously doing. I thought of it, like for me, it's like, well, what a great life. That's really where I felt called to be, and that's where I felt like my greatest contribution could be was doing that job. So I had an interest in the job before doing that kind of work, and once I met this guy and really saw on the ground level how much good this work can do, that's when I really got inspired to pursue it.
So growing up, I went to a Regnum Christi school, and the Legionaries were our chaplains. And the Legionaries that I encountered were absolutely incredible people. And of course, like the name tells, it's almost has a very militant lifestyle to it. The Legionaries of Christ, and they're out there fighting for Christ. And so that was something that I began to embody. There's one priest in particular, Father Todd Velarde, who was just an excellent man, a man of virtue, and a man that was on fire for the faith and went out and fought for the faith in, again, a very militant way. But he was a very joyful, very humble, very human, man's man that I could very much relate to. And it was, these encounters where you see a priest and there's something that sparks interiorly inside the person that you can say, you have that moment where you can say, I could see myself doing this. Look at this priesthood. The priesthood is not just for, I don't know, people have these conceptions where priests fall off of trees and, they're not from this planet, but here's someone who's very, very talented, and he's giving all of those gifts to the Lord. And so for me to see a very talented young man who's out there fighting for Christ in this militant way was something that really caught my heart on fire, but also allowed me to enter into a perspective that showed that I could see myself doing this. So the militant lifestyle was something that definitely hit home for me. And I think, as a kid who grew up outdoors and again, the very rigid lifestyle, that desire for adventure and for, kind of the go-get-em attitude, very type A, that really hit home for me. And so, running into the chaplaincy, the chaplain corps in the Army, and having that love for the priesthood, that's where those two loves kind of met with the military and the Catholic Church to a vocation to be a Catholic chaplain. New Evangelization is very much centered on attracting through beauty and attracting through, seeing a witness of the gospel. I think that's, people really, really desire that. And when you do begin to live an ordered life and you see things that are ordered and, almost symmetrical and they have that beauty to them, it draws people in. So in the military, when you begin to live a life of structure, when you begin to live a life of habit and virtue, then not only does your surroundings, are they affected by it, but you begin to be interiorly transformed so that the order that you're working towards outwardly changes you inwardly so that you become an ordered person yourself. And then the work of the evangelization flows naturally from that person who is interiorly ordered. So we have to order it around the right things, obviously, but when you get a good evangelist and people look at him and are attracted to him or her because they do have a beautiful soul that emanates outwards, that's obviously the saints, that's because they've been living a life of order that really attracts people, and that's something that it's not contrary to the faith. As a matter of fact, the orderedness is, a primary aspect of the faith, that we have, reasonable, rational ways of thinking towards things, and that life of order that the person lives fits right in perfect flow with all of that. So it's a very Catholic idea. All those good things that we see in the world can be baptized and can be used as Catholics, can be used as priests and seminarians to show how beautiful the gospel is. Grace building on nature, have an ordered nature, add beautiful grace to it, and you have a great evangelist.
I think the one thing that came to my mind about new evangelization and all this kind of stuff is that something Mike mentioned is, a lot of people have this idea that priests just kind of fall off of trees, and it's like you're born and like you're gonna be you're gonna be a priest like when you're 5, right? But I think there's almost nobody that actually fits that description, and you as you get out in the world and meet more people who have real life experiences, or you meet a priest in the military, maybe in the Marines or on active duty or with the Navy or the Army or anything, I think it sends a really valuable message about the faith, that this is still something that's vibrant, that it's applicable to all areas in the world. It doesn't just stop at the end of at the church doors when you walk out. That this applies to any number of situations. And I think people today, they want to see priests out in the world, and they want to see how the faith really relates to daily life, and they don't want to just take it on credence from somebody in authority. They want to see, like, how are you living this out? And they see somebody they can point to, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember the chaplain, when I was in the Marines, I remember a chaplain who would come with us on our 40-mile marches for training, or come with us on a 20-mile run, or the guy who was with us in Iraq or on deployment. I remember these guys who are out there doing all these things with us, and I think that sends the message that the faith is really, it's still there, and it's vibrant, and it applies not just to one specific thing, but can apply to any number of things. And I think that kind of message can really evangelize a lot more than a lot of other areas, and so there's a tremendous potential for good just by the witness value of a priest, Catholic priest in the military, going where the soldiers and the sailors, wherever they happen to be sent.